we have breaking news. We have a video from Graham Plattner, who is addressing the public. Let's play that.
Hey, everyone. It's Graham Plattner here. I think as many of you know, over the past couple days, I have faced some very serious allegations, and I just want to make it clear. This is all false. The things that have been claimed did not happen. It's not real. It has placed an immense amount of weight on me as I think about what needs to happen now. Amy and I are regular people. We were not looking for this experience. We were not looking to get into politics. We had no desire to run for office. I just want you to think about like what you would do as a regular person in a position where a much larger world, large forces were working against you personally to accuse you of the worst thing that a person could do, and it was not remotely true. I learned about this through press inquiries with no time to truly respond, no time for investigations before a corporate media system and the political establishment got to act as judge, jury, and executioner. Accusations are supposed to be the beginning of things, not the end. I think it's really important to understand why this is happening in the timeline, why this is happening right now, much like October, when the first attack started, much like the news that was created the week before the primary. There is a reason that this is happening now. I only have until July 13th until I am officially the nominee. This was the last week to try to get me off of the ballot. And that's why this is occurring. It's not the false allegations, though, that have brought us to where we are. It's the fact that they are being used by the political establishment to put structural pressure on us. We live in a political system that is not built for normal people. It is a system that is built structurally to make sure that movements like ours cannot flourish. That if they begin to succeed, they can be crushed. What we have accomplished here, you made possible. The people of Maine, the volunteers, the voters, the grassroots donors. And I have all the faith in the world that we could win if we could continue to harness that. But the brutal political reality is that they are going to take everything away from us. Those in power who have the ability to do so are using these allegations as an excuse to take away all of the things that we need to run a campaign. We are going to lose our ability to fundraise. We are going to lose our ability to access voter data. We are going to lose all of the things that any campaign needs on the basic level simply to function. Larger organizations, the national level party, the bigger donor networks, they have all committed to spending no money in this race if I'm in it. They would rather see Susan Collins win than have me be the next senator from Maine. What comes next needs to come from the people. needs to come from the people of Maine, needs to come from the voters who on June 9th, at a strength of over 150,000, the largest number in the history of Maine primaries, said no to this kind of politics. Voted for a politics that would actually represent them. Voted against the political system, against the donor class, against the entrenched forces. And I'm not asking for how this process is going to work. I'm not trying to dictate to anyone who it should be or how we get there, but I will say this. It needs to be open, transparent, and democratic. It needs to be reflecting the will and the values of the people that built this movement, the people that showed up on June 9th. People in D.C. need to stay in D.C. Decisions should not be made in back rooms by people in places of political power. Party apparatchiks are not the ones to make these decisions. These decisions need to be made in the open by the people of this state, the people who got us here. This is exactly the kind of political system that everyone voted against on June 9th. And for that reason, we need to be assured that it is going to be open and democratic as we move forward. Amy and I struggled about getting into this. Last summer, right around this time of year, we sat down and we looked at each other and we said, if we believe in the kind of politics we think that we do, we have to do this. Over the past couple days, really yesterday and today, we have had to have that exact same conversation. We believe that for the movement to continue, it can't be me. And for that reason, we are suspending campaign operations. This is incredibly difficult because I know that some will think it's an admission of guilt, and it most certainly is not. We're not doing it because of the allegations. We're doing it because of the structures that are being taken away from us by those in power. And I also feel an immense amount of responsibility to everyone who has worked so hard to get us to where we are. We went toe-to-toe with one of the most entrenched political systems in the history of the world, and we won. We beat them on June 9th in overwhelming numbers. We did it the right way. We built a campaign. We engaged in electoral politics. We motivated people. We banded together. We did it the way that we were told we are supposed to make change. And we won. And now they are not going to let us have it. Not if it's me. And so we're suspending campaign operations. I want to make clear, though, I intend to file my paperwork to withdraw. The process needs to assure that what comes next is reflective of the Mainers who on June 9th turned out and showed that they are desperate for a different kind of politics. It needs to be driven not from back rooms, but by the will of the people. And the decisions that come next must come from that. All we were asking for was health care, was to end the genocide, to use our taxpayer dollars at home to uplift our communities instead of waging war overseas. We were asking for a fair system. We were asking for an end to the corruption, the end to the money in politics. We were asking for real democracy, and we did it the right way, and we won. But now the ball is in the court of the Democratic establishment. My name might be on the ballot right now, but that ballot line belongs to the people of Maine. And on November 3rd, it needs to belong to the people of Maine. And the next Democratic senator for Maine needs to belong to the people of Maine. They need to reflect the will and the values of the people of this state. I love this state. I love Maine, and I love Mainers in ways that I can't really describe. I'm immensely proud of what we have built, and I have the utmost faith that we will continue to build, and we will continue to move towards a better future. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank all of you. And keep fighting. We're going to win someday.
Well, that was Graham Plattner officially announcing that he is dropping off of the ballot for Maine Senate, or for federal Senate from Maine, but taking zero responsibility for any of the scandals and more troubling things in his past that have destroyed that campaign, instead blaming, corporate media, the political establishment, lots of hate for the political establishment, saying that we banded together, we did it the way we were told we were supposed to make change, and we won, and now they are not going to let us have it. So lots of finger pointing and blame, and not taking any responsibility. Note that whoever he conceives of as the political establishment, you do have many of his once allies, including Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna, also calling for him to drop out. People who believe many of the same policy ideas, that Graham Plattner himself says that he was taken down for. He also said during that 10-minute video that all we were asking for was health care, was to end the genocide, to use our taxpayer dollars at home to uplift our communities instead of waging war overseas. We were asking for a fair system. We are asking for an end to the corruption. So lots of allegations that he was being taken out by nefarious forces that are forcing him to suspend his campaign, rather than the drip, drip, drip of scandal after scandal that has dogged his campaign and that have littered the last few months with red flags. I want to bring back in our guests at the table, Neera Tanden from CAP, as well as Nikki McCann Ramirez from Rolling Stone. So, Nikki, what did you make of that mini documentary that we just watched?
I think it's clear that whoever was advising him in media has left the campaign at this point, because that's not a statement you let your candidate put out on their own. I also think when I see something like that, my question is always, who is they? Who is they? Is it the AFL-CIO? Is it the Maine Democratic Party? Is it, the dozens of allies you have who have abandoned your campaign? I think Plattner would have been much better served by a 2-minute video announcing that he was suspending campaign operations. He could deny the allegations. That is his right. This has not been proven in a court of law. They are allegations. But this screed, I don't think, does anything to help transition out toward a new candidate, to bolster sort of the idea that this process is going to go forward, that he supports having his voters, who he claims to care about, continue to be represented by someone who holds their same values. I think the thing here is that Graham Plattner, time and time again, was given chances by the voters of Maine. I know a lot of voters who live in Maine, friends of mine, who swallowed a lot of stuff, who were deeply uncomfortable with the stories coming out about Graham Plattner. And they swallowed that and they voted for him because they thought that in the slate of candidates before him, he was the best chance to defeat Susan Collins. And the people he has let down the most, aside from the people who he, allegedly criminally assaulted, are the voters of Maine who believed in him, who gave him their time, their energy, their votes, who invested their belief that they could actually have a better government in him. And he let them down by not being honest with them. It wasn't that he wasn't honest to us, to the media, to the donor class, is that he wasn't transparent with his voters. And that video, I don't know. If there was any respect left for me, it's kind of gone after seeing that. There were so many ways to bow out of this race that weren't that.
Yeah. I do want to get your thoughts, Neera, but first I want to go to MS Now Capitol Hill reporter Kevin Fry, who is live on the scene in Bangor, Maine. Kevin, what are you hearing on the ground from voters about how all of this has shaken out in the last few days?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been about a month since I was here last, and at that point, that was right after the New York Times sexting scandal, and a lot of folks were willing to, as was just being mentioned, digest this and say, okay, we're gonna accept the narrative that he is a changed man. As we talk to folks over the last day and a half that we've been here, it is very much we've turned the corner. The red line that no one could really identify necessarily a month ago had been crossed. The Rubicon had been overcome, and that was because of the reporting in the last 2 days. So this felt like where we were inevitably tumbling toward. Now, as we've been talking to voters, they would like to see what they described as a quick and a transparent process. They want to see this as being democratic. And several folks that we spoke to were quick to name drop folks, including Troy Jackson. They see him, at least a couple of the folks that we talked to, as kind of picking up at least the policy aims that maybe Plattner was espousing, but certainly without the baggage that he carried. Now, some of the news within the last 2 hours or so beyond this Plattner statement is that we now have at least a preliminary sense of what this process is going to now look like, now that there is going to be a vacancy on the Democratic line ahead of November's election. And that is that the Maine Democratic Party today, members of the committee, met, about 100 or so of them, discussed exactly the steps forward. And our understanding from talking to sources that were on that call is that this looks like it's going to be about 500 to 600 delegates meeting for a convention, time to be announced. But the counties are supposed to, we're being told, start working on figuring out who those delegates are going to be, to send them to this centralized meeting, and from there they'll work on electing a candidate. Obviously, one of the tensions that we're expecting to see and that we've witnessed over the last few days is between kind of the party establishment versus those that believe that they need to basically poke the establishment in the eye. That could also be interpreted as more progressives versus moderates. There are different ways of kind of interpreting this depending on who you're talking to, but that is at least how voters are kind of responding to what we're looking at with the prospect of an opening, and how the party is, at least at the moment, preparing to navigate it.
Kevin, thanks so much for your time. I am sure we will be heading back to you later this evening and in the coming days to hear your insights on what people are saying on the ground and how this convention of sorts is going to shape up. Thanks so much. Neera, so you watched this 10-minute video as well from Graham Plattner, refusing to take responsibility for any of the things in his past. He certainly has the right to defend himself against some of these criminal allegations, but not taking any responsibility for how his campaign has ended up. Do you think that was helpful for the party to move forward and to defeat Susan Collins?
I mean, I guess I'd say, look, this whole situation is a horrifying tragedy on so many levels. And the people I feel the worst for are really the people Nikki is talking about, the people who were betrayed by Graham Plattner. I mean, he's angry at the world, but it's his own actions that have caused this situation that we're in. And I feel like the fact that he takes zero responsibility of that really enrages me. But I feel the people I feel the worst for in this situation are people who felt hope about this campaign. And I do think the process has to ensure that people who felt hope in this campaign, in his campaign, and about change in Maine have a voice in that process. I mean, what I found sort of really disturbing about this video is there's so much more ire to like Democrats nationally than two people he never mentioned, Susan Collins or Donald Trump. And I find it sort of tragic that after all the destruction and wreckage. You know, he's going out by basically trying to torch Democrats. And just as a reminder, like, he did win the primary, but it's his own actions that have caused this. And you don't have to ask me. You can ask Senator Sanders, Senator Warren, Congressman Khanna, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. These are his allies in the fight who recognized what happened here was horrifying. And genuinely, I hope that in future there can be more acceptance and actually trying to build back, because, you know, this is he's caused a lot of pain to a lot of people who put their hopes in him. And those people are the ones who need to find hope again. And I think it's his responsibility to be part of building, like, you know, not destroying everything around him, but actually helping build support for whoever the nominee is in the future.
Yeah, I mean, and I should again say he has flatly denied the allegations of sexual assault, among other things that have other accusations that have been levied against him. But I will say that the other people that I feel terrible for, not only because of the things that they say, are the women. Yes, it's not just the voters. It's the women who had to basically parade these awful periods of their lives, or what they, you know, allegations that they have made at the very least, before the public and the media, because they felt like it was their civic responsibility to tell people.
And they're getting viciously attacked by people. It's really ugly. And, you know, you're absolutely right. They are the victims of this whole situation and should never have had to bear this burden.
Yes, as well as one of his campaign staffers who has been smeared because she resigned early on. But anyway, I hope that there are a lot of apologies coming to some of those women.
Okay, we are continuing to monitor the fallout from Graham Plattner suspending his campaign for Senate. His decision follows a wave of calls for him to drop out of the race. Literally, nobody in elected office is defending Graham Plattner right now. That is, except for the President of the United States.
Well, he steps out of the race. So he won the primary.
And now there's these new allegations.
It's very hard for them to do. And it's really a question of whether or not you believe the woman. A lot of people say big falsehoods.
A lot of people say big falsehoods. There you go, from the mouth of Donald Trump. Now, just last month, Trump was calling Plattner a thug and the worst human being that's ever run for office. But it seems the president has never met a sexual assault allegation he didn't want to question. And those bizarre comments come on the heels of a rough 48 hours for the president of the United States, who has been facing humiliation after humiliation. I mean, today, a federal court officially ordered that $5 million of Donald Trump's money be released to E. Jean Carroll, who successfully sued Trump for defamation. In a blistering order, the judge wrote, quote, "Defendant has been stalling this case for years. A jury unanimously concluded that he sexually abused and defamed plaintiff and awarded her damages accordingly. It is time for him to do equity and pay the judgment." Also today, another federal judge rejected Trump's efforts to put his name back on the Kennedy Center, a loss that we know humiliates Trump because his administration has left a tarp over the place where his name used to be, as if that tarp means his name is actually still there, and who knows what they are telling him in there. We don't know. Now, on top of all of that, Trump faced even more humiliation today when his so-called peace negotiations with Iran fell completely apart. Who could have seen that one coming? All of us. The U.S. has launched multiple new rounds of airstrikes against Iran, including one just tonight. Trump has now declared his ceasefire over, claiming he doesn't even want to deal anymore. And as a result, oil prices are once again spiking, with gas prices expected to rise again soon. It is safe to say Trump is not having a very good week. And it is only Wednesday, everyone. Lots of time to go. But perhaps the most humiliating thing that happened to Donald Trump this week, the thing, you know, that gets under his skin more than anything else, was his doddering performance on the world stage. It started as soon as he got off the plane from the annual NATO summit in Turkey. Trump meandered, you can see him there on the screen, down the tarmac until Turkish President Erdogan took him by the arm and told him where to stand. That happened. Then Trump held a series of bilateral meetings and press conferences where he seemed even more confused. At one point, he even invented an entirely new country for America to bomb.
2 months ago, we had 100, I told the story yesterday, we had 111 missiles shot by the Islamic Republic of Japan.
I seriously hope someone is making sure the president has not accidentally declared war on Japan. Anything is possible. Trump followed that up with one of his signature rants about Barack Obama's Iran deal, known as the JCPOA, of course, but he somehow even bungled that one.
The Obama deal, that was one of the worst tragedies. JCPOC. What a terrible deal.
And speaking of getting names wrong, there was also this embarrassing slip while meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Do you have a question for President Putin? Do you have a question for President Putin? Not Zelensky. Putin. What would you like to ask him? Because I'm going to ask him that question.
Okay. So what happened there, just in case that was like, what the heck is happening? Trump asked the reporters if they have a question for President Putin, points at President Zelensky, then realizes his mistake, and his fix is to try to cover for it by acting like he's Vladimir Putin's press secretary, like he's just fielding questions to take back to the Russian dictator. Trump had more than a few of those moments today, like this moment when he started talking about the president of Turkey like he was the CEO of a tech startup.
I want to thank President Erdogan, who's really a great man. He's a strong person, a very strong personality, and that's why he runs such a successful and good company.
Running a company, running a country, what's the difference? They're both just ways to get rich, at least for Donald Trump, it seems. The man is basically getting laughed at every day by judges, by world leaders, by European soccer players. Most are responding to him with a collective eye roll. But it doesn't mean we can entirely dismiss him. Because when this president gets embarrassed, when he feels cornered, that is when he's most likely to try and cling to power. I mean, in just the last 24 hours, we learned that the Trump administration is now threatening to withhold $1 billion in counterterrorism funds from states unless those states completely change the way they run their elections. The more desperate he gets, the more desperate those plans get too. The Trump administration is demanding states transition to using paper ballots, verify the citizenship of every voter, and hand over their voter rolls to the Trump administration. As the New York Times puts it, the policies align closely with some of the goals pushed by right-wing activists that are rooted in false conspiracy theories about election machines and voting by non-citizens during the 2020 election. In other words, Trump wants to force states to completely upend the way they conduct elections just months before the midterms, or risk losing critical security funding. Miles Taylor, a former top security official in Donald Trump's first administration, wrote about what this new policy means for those states. And he says, quote, "I can tell you firsthand that those are the funds used to protect you against terrorist attacks, cyber attacks, mass shootings, weaponized drones, and more. I will say it again. If you live in a blue state, Donald Trump and his team are threatening to put your life in danger if your state doesn't give him control over elections." Very clear there. Trump is at his most desperate and unpredictable moment of his presidency so far. And that means he is also at his most dangerous.
Does anyone buy that? Or is there something more to what that Post reporter was asking just then? Something about the security of that plane. Joining us, MS Now international reporter Inez de la Catera in Ankara, Turkey, New York Times chief White House correspondent, and MS Now contributor Peter Baker, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. He's also the author of the weekly Substack newsletter Home and Away, and former CIA Director and Secretary of Defense in the Obama administration, Leon Panetta. And as you were in that room, what a weird answer.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, President Trump made a lot of news at this summit, but there are a lot of questions he didn't answer. And I would say he didn't make so much news during that final press conference. So that exchange that you just played was certainly kind of a bizarre one. He was asked twice about why he's not flying his new Air Force One back home, and twice he declined to answer. He just said that the plane would be going to the UK to visit service members there. But there are all sorts of questions as to whether this has to do with security, like you heard the New York Post reporter asking. We just don't know at this point, but it was certainly unusual. The fact that the president is not flying back on this plane is unusual, and then the fact that he wouldn't answer questions about it is certainly raising eyebrows.
Peter, what do you have on this?
Katie, I'm with you. This is not an answer that sounds particularly persuasive. The idea that he's going to give up flying on this jet he's talked so much about so he can show it to some soldiers. I agree with you. I can't imagine anybody believes that. Security is the first question you ask, right? He is in Ankara. It's not that far from the Middle East. There is now, this rupture in the ceasefire, which he's declared with Iran, which he declared today as over. And that's a plane that has gone through a very quick retrofit compared to what normal Air Force Ones go through in terms of, making it compatible with what a president and commander-in-chief should be flying. Now, Secretary Panetta probably knows this much better than I do, but there would be questions asked as to whether that jet has the protections, has the capacity for, security that a normal Air Force One built by Boeing on behalf of the Air Force, according to very particular specs, would have. The plane with the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, is supposed to be able to ward off attacks, be able to withstand, an electrical magnetic pulse, all kinds of things that are meant to put, the Commander-in-Chief in safe hands. Is this jet now flying for luxury, which is what he's talked about, meeting that need?
Secretary, Peter teed you up.
I've always been concerned about security issues with this kind of plane that's built by another country, regardless of the fact that country, we may have good relations with that country. The fact is that from a security point of view, you have got to be concerned that there are going to be efforts to try to gather intelligence. And I'm sure they've reviewed the whole plane, but as somebody involved with security, I would be very concerned about making sure that the president's security is protected. The only way to do that is by having that plane made in the United States and carrying the equipment that is provided by the United States so that we can assure that the president is not only secure but safe. So I don't think there's any question that there are security concerns here. What they are, we don't know, but I'm sure that's involved.
Have you ever heard of a situation where the president switches planes like this? I mean, I know usually there are two Air Force Ones. One is not called Air Force One. When the president travels, there's always a backup. Usually if there is a problem, it's a maintenance issue, right? Could it just be a maintenance issue?
Well, it's a brand new plane. If there's a maintenance issue with a brand new plane, that raises even more concerns. I don't think this is about maintenance. This is a cover story of some kind to try to deploy one plane to Britain and have the president return to the old plane that was Air Force One. There's more going on. I think the war in Iran may have something to do with it. He is in Turkey. It's right next to Iran. There does have to be some real concerns about the president's security. Even he himself basically admitted the concern about his personal security. So for all of those reasons, I think that a decision was made to try to protect the safety of the president.
So, Richard, let's talk about the context here, because as the secretary pointed out, Iran is very close by. There's also news that the ceasefire, I mean, if it's still on, it's extremely fragile, more fragile than it's ever been. The president seemed to indicate that it was not still on. We struck Iran last night. Does this signal anything to you about what might be coming?
Not so much what's coming, but what has been and what is, Katie. First of all, the United States has obviously targeted Iranian leadership, whether years ago going after Soleimani and more recently going after the Ayatollah and others. The idea that Iran might retaliate by going after senior Americans, including the president, is unfortunately plausible. Plus, this ceasefire never was complete, and no one should expect it to be complete going forward. I think we've got to assume periodic flare-ups between the United States and Iran, whether it's over the Strait, the nuclear issue, or just about anything else. So I would just think in this kind of an environment, it would be smart to emphasize or maximize security. And if it turns out there is a differential between the old plane and the new one, smart to use the old plane, but not smart at all to ever be using the new one. It's not just questions of safety, but presidents have to basically be able to do everything the job could conceivably require from Air Force One. And if this plane has any limitations, then it should not be used.
Well, I mean, if there's any limitations, why was it put in the air in the first place? That's a question. But I do want to ask you about the Iranian intentions here, and I'm going to get this to the secretary as well. But first to you, Richard. Would the Iranians really assassinate an American president? Wouldn't that be inviting World War III?
I think it's unlikely, but I can't sit here and tell you it's inconceivable because, part of it goes back to your question, would the Iranians? Well, who necessarily are the Iranians at this point? Yeah. We just had the funeral and all the people there. This is clearly a factionalized leadership in Iran. Could there be elements of an Iranian leadership who with the wherewithal to do it? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't think we can dismiss that out of hand, whatever the calculation. Again, in the context of an ongoing war, breakdown in ceasefire, given what's happened over recent days, weeks, months, and years, I would think it makes sense to be super careful at this point, particularly with the life of the President of the United States.
Secretary Panetta, same question to you.
Bottom line is that you cannot trust the regime in Iran. I think from the very beginning, although initially it was about regime change, the failure to get any kind of regime change has made clear that we are dealing with a hardline regime in Iran. And the result of that is that we really don't know what the leadership is all about there, how it's operating. You've got obviously the military leadership. You have the Guard leadership as well. You really don't know who's on first. And the result of that is that you really don't know. And frankly, it's that lack of trust that I think means that this war not only is going to continue, but that we are going to find it very difficult to implement whatever agreement we had with Iran. And so we are in a very tenuous situation right now as a result of what's happening.
This more relaxed summer season is no reprieve for Trump's three largest vulnerabilities: the unpopular Iran policy under strain today, as we've been reporting, the high prices, and the Epstein scandal, which has endured with new witnesses on Capitol Hill. And it's a flashpoint for grassroots voters. We have new footage from a Republican congressman's new town hall.
What are you going to do for benefits for all people with disabilities?
Well, under the One Big Beautiful Bill, we protected a system that if it had gone unchecked, it would not have been long-term available for the very people that are the most vulnerable.
Why do you continue to protect the pedophiles and Trump's DOJ as they continue to break the law?
That's what the pushback sounds like in the rare district where an incumbent Republican's even holding these kind of meetings. The affordability crisis, huge. Half of Americans struggle to pay for the basics. And even the other half of those doing better agree the nation is facing this affordability crisis under Trump, a problem that has worsened as the Trump administration cuts food assistance. Tonight, we have new reporting that housing foreclosures hit a 7-year high. Now, unlike, say, a Depression era, this is a crisis that comes along with deeper tension because everyone can see the rich getting richer. More U.S. CEOs have crossed what was the once rare pay threshold of $100 million a year for the first time in 5 years. Wall Street's been doing great since Trump came back. Corporate leaders and the minority of elites who have stocks, they're all up. But that's driving a gulf that even has MAGA Republicans mad. Megyn Kelly recently slamming what she called Trump's grift while regular people struggle. Trump and his family reaping windfalls from their own conflicts of interest and self-dealing, over $2 billion last year alone. Kelly and Tucker Carlson are leading a growing backlash on the right, while independents and liberals are turning to more democratic socialists as one answer to address all this greed. It's enough to make you want to holler, as the old line goes. It's something Dylan Ratigan famously did on this network when he called out corporate greed and what he called the, quote, banksters, taking advantage while regular people work hard and suffer. I just showed the evidence, the foreclosures hitting this high, the affordability crisis, and this inequality. What's happening? Is it fixable?
What's happening is the greatest concentration of wealth probably that's even more than what we saw during the robber barons at this point, just by magnitude. So concentration of wealth is what's happening. Anybody that can obviously observe that. To make it not happen would mean that you have to understand why it's happening, I guess. And from my perspective, the reason why it's happening is because it's easier to make money through some form of extraction or gatekeeping than through creation. And so as long as it's legal or permissible to get money through some extractive mechanism or through some gatekeeping mechanism where you exploit leverage or permit access or whatever it is, some form of exclusivity that's unnatural, that's always an easier way to create money than by creating actual value. And so because the American culture so admires and looks up to the true creators of value, I think it's one of the best things about this country, actually, that goodwill for extremely creative, innovative people gets borrowed by people who are making money through extractive or gatekeeping techniques, basically, that where the clothing of a creative entrepreneur and the status of a creative entrepreneur, they're actually on the opposite side of that.
A charlatan in founder's clothing, as it were.
Well, I mean, they even might be a founder, but there's somebody whose value proposition is that you lose and they win, as opposed to a value proposition where you win, I win. And that is, I think, the most important filter and the most important abuse of the American dream, and actually the biggest insult to true creators who create real value, is the borrowing. It's like there's the animals in the wild that pretend to be, some other thing that they're not in order to sneak into the Beaver Lodge or whatever it is. And so I think that...
I don't know if they're sneaking to
wherever they're trying to sneak.
Can beavers make a lodge? Are you referring...
Listen, I was just in the Adirondacks, and so I got beavers on the mind. But, my point is that there is the true creators, and then there are those who pretend to be creators who then are actually in some way removing value.
And
that then allows for a massive, because it's easier to make money through corruption effectively, whether it's monopoly markets, whether it's unique access over the government, whatever the mechanism.
But you think inequality is the issue? In other words,
no, I don't. Everybody knows inequality is the issue.
Yeah.
And what we're witnessing right now amounts to what everybody on Wall Street, they call the K-shaped economy. I'm sure you've used that phrase. You've probably done graphics on this show, where the economy right now is actually benefiting a portion of the people in this country, and then it's harming the others. I mean, the other thing that you have to understand in America, in terms of how things sort of play out on the policy side, is it's really the only country in the world where capital is enshrined with rights that are superior to humans.
Right.
Which doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So then the interests of capital sometimes, or even as technology advances more frequently, are at the direct expense of humans.
Yeah,
and that's sort of what makes things politically very interesting, I think.
Well, and this is why you make clear points, is you're driving to the depth of it. It's the same when you have a fiduciary duty under law, where you're saying, actually, more than the labor value or the long-term rights of the community, or whether we destroy the world around us,
or whether we create anything of value,
at all,
anybody.
We actually not have to.
Our job is to optimize for how much money we make.
Not that we have to return on investment. That's great. Not that we have to even say big return. No, we have to optimize maximum value, meaning you're always putting it above labor, the environment, everything else.
Financial results. And that's a reasonable mandate if the rulemaking is you can only make money by creating actual value.
Yeah. Now, I want you to hold the old saying, we're going to now go and break into the Beaver's Lodge. Yeah, everybody knows.
As they all say.
Nature.
This is a long-known phrase.
We set up a reminder of why people are now worried about a bubble on the left and the right. You're the right person for this, so stay with me. But you have the Trump Treasury Department now has what's an internal report, they didn't release it, saying there could be an AI bubble. It warns of risks posed by this current version of the AI market and makes a comparison many have said. Is this like the dot-com bubble, which of course hurt a lot of regular Americans? And there's a lot of talk about this.
Concerns over the rising cost of artificial intelligence. It led to a major tech stock sell-off that dragged down the S&P and NASDAQ.
All great technology changes produce bubbles.
Artificial intelligence gives a massive boost to the markets, but for how long?
So what's the end? Is it a bubble that bursts eventually?
I think it is, yes.
This doesn't have to be inevitable. The Times notes, though, that when you look at Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook's parent company, Meta, they're going to spend $700 billion this year alone. You can think of that as a bill that might come due. We should also note that the big AI companies are, for the most part, losing money. If you want a sign of the inequality that Radigan just mentioned and the famed irrational exuberance, Elon Musk has a new company, SpaceX, which was valued by the markets at one point as equal to Amazon. One company has been around for decades, makes a lot of money. The other is losing money. Have we lost the plot? We put the question to you, Dylan Radigan.
I mean, I think it's self-evident that there's certainly a price. When you don't know the value of something, which we saw this in 99, for instance, you basically assign the most optimistic or most pessimistic, depending on the flow of the sort of momentum of the underlying data. And so in this case, because no one really knows when, exactly how, where, et cetera, it's just been assigned the most optimistic narrative, which is AI can do anything. And it is, will do everything, and all the things that we've all heard. I think that the most interesting insight in terms of facts relative to artificial intelligence are in that SpaceX prospectus, which is their investment offering document, which is entirely where they have to reveal what are the basic assumptions. Why should we give you this money for this company, for this thing? And what are your assumptions? And if you look at what the business is now, it doesn't have anything to do with what they sold as a stock. What they sold as a stock was 93% based on the idea that artificial intelligence would grow by 10,000% in the next 5 years, and that 60% of the computer-based jobs, any job that's done with interacting with the computer, would be done by AI, such that instead of having that the revenue, the reason you can justify 10,000% growth is, well, if I'm going to swap the humans for the robots, I can get to that point. And so if you really want to sort of something to have a referendum on, you're like, okay, do I really think 60% of the computer-based jobs will be gone in the next 5 years, which is what the SpaceX prospectus says. And even if that's technically possible, what are the political consequences of that? And what's the political resistance to that and the humanity of Gen Z?
Right, a jobs crisis. And let me ask, I mean, in psychology, they call that motivated reasoning.
Okay.
And in journalism, they call it bias.
Of course.
Where you want to get
Goldman
to that
Sachs
outcome.
and J.P. Morgan have to tell a story. Right. But the point is, whether Goldman and J.P. Morgan, who wrote that story and published that story and sold that story, or SpaceX, who supported that story, right? Because SpaceX was sold not based on the value of the business that exists at all. SpaceX was sold based on the percentage of the total addressable market.
And let me throw one more headline at you. Jeff Bezos, he's got also a space company. And just today, the news is coming out. They want a $130 billion valuation, and they want billions.
You're talking about this is Blue Origin?
Blue Origin.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, I don't always use jargon because not everyone's heard of Blue Origin yet.
Blue Origin is a name of a thing. I wouldn't even call that jargon. I don't know if it's saying somebody's name.
Not
like
okay, all right, not jargon.
But like Ari, then you're Ari. If I call you bro,
how about like, more insidery than it needs to be? Bottom line is Bezos has a space company like Musk. My final question.
Maybe the people would like to know the name of the company.
Oh my God!
All right,
you can tell that we know each other. 40 seconds left.
Go.
Should an honest government that's safeguarding the economy for the public be more involved in what right now looks like hundreds of billions of dollars of capital transfer to those companies and these looming AI IPOs if this is going to cause wide risk?
Yes. The issue is not the need for regulatory intervention to deal with. This will be the biggest political change in our lifetimes. It's going to make the horse and buggy look like not much, although not that I was here for that. The issue is lack of trust in the government under both parties.